Good morning, and in honor of Women's History Month, welcome to It's Only Been 65 Years. I'm Ranu Bopanna, class of 1987, and the past president of the MIT South Asian Alumni Association. MITSAAA aims to connect our South Asian alumni with MIT and each other, and to offer an outlet for shared development and conversations. If you're not yet on our mailing list, please check out our website and our social media. Links are in the chat. If you've not yet heard about our history project and exhibit, South Asia and the Institute Transformational Connections, please check out the MITSAAA website and the exhibit currently on display in the Malhagen Gallery at MIT. And Kim, if you wouldn't mind, would you please put up our project banner? This project tells the remarkable story of South Asia and MIT to honor the determination and grit of multiple generations of South Asians at MIT, and celebrates this alumni's many accomplishments, technical expertise, and ingenuity that have significantly advanced life in South Asia, the United States, and the world. One of the things that we learned through this project is that MIT played an outsized role in South Asia's economic development and even in its struggle for independence from colonial rule. MIT, in fact, was a beacon for freedom fighters in a colonized South Asia who thought its technical expertise represented a way forward for their country and were among its earliest South Asian students. Later, the newly decolonized South Asian countries used MIT-trained professionals to build their infrastructure and set up their institutions of higher learning. You can check out the short films that we produced for this project on YouTube, and I'll include the links in the chat. And we are now working on creating an online digital companion exhibit so that those around the world can access this remarkable history. Today, I'm pleased to focus on the South Asian alumni of MIT. And Kim, you can remove the photo, thank you. It took almost a century after MIT's founding in 1861 for the first South Asian woman, Almitra Patel, class of 1958, SM 1959, to enroll at the Institute as a student. Across all 5 schools, it took 3 to 5 decades after the arrival of men from South Asia for the women to be admitted to the Institute. Today, South Asian women still only constitute a quarter, approximately 1,500 in total, of MIT's over 6,000 South Asian alumni. Kim, if you wouldn't mind, please putting up the timeline vinyl. Thank you. MIT's South Asian women are a diverse group of undergraduates, graduates, and faculty. Until 1980, there were less than a dozen South Asian women at MIT, and most were graduate students. The 1990s saw the South Asian female presence at the Institute quadruple, from less than 100 in the previous decade to almost 400 at the turn of the century. First-generation South Asian Americans and graduate students from South Asia, neither of whom were subject to MIT's international student quota, formed the majority of admits. Over the last decade, graduate students from South Asia have constituted the largest number of South Asian women at MIT, approximately 200 between 2011 and 2020, followed by South Asian American undergraduates, approximately 111 between 2011 and 2020. We will first speak with Ms. Almitra Patel, the very first South Asian woman to graduate from MIT, and then we will bring on MIT history professor Sana Aiyar and 4 of her student interns who will tell us more about the project as well as their experiences of being South Asian women today. And then we will open up the floor to your questions. Kim, can you please remove the, thank you. Almitra Patel was born in 1936 in colonial India. Her father was a businessman and her mother a civic activist. She was surrounded by science from an early age, and she was the first girl to study science at her high school. Her father wanted her to study engineering, so he sent her to MIT to pursue higher studies in ceramics. In 1958, she became the first South Asian woman to graduate from MIT. Over the next 3 decades, she worked in industry and ceramics. After retirement, she became involved in civic and environmental issues. In 1991, she set out to find a solution for hygienic municipal solid waste management and found that most of 80 Indian cities that she visited had nowhere to dump their waste except in the outskirts of the city. She filed a landmark 1996 public interest litigation in the Indian Supreme Court against the open dumping of municipal solid waste and was instrumental in the drafting of municipal solid waste management rules. Almitra, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Patel, Almitra, you said that you were not aware of being the first South Asian woman to graduate from MIT when we contacted you. What has it been like to learn that?
Not at all. I was quite amazed and very grateful that I didn't know it while I was a student. The pressure would have been too much.
I can only imagine. Tell us a little bit about your early life and how you ended up at MIT.
My father had poor health, so the family relocated over the Western Ghats to a rain shadow area with a dry climate considered perfect for TB patients. There were no antibiotics at the time. He didn't have TB, as it turned out. He had bronchiectasis from his cement tile business dust. So I went to a beautiful hilltop school for Anglo-Indian children, mainly 265 acres, surrounded 360 degrees with a view of hills and valleys. And it was a wonderful nature-loving kickstart to one's life. And at the time I was there, all the boys did science and all the girls had to do housecraft, which was sewing and baking and cooking and so on. But I am a left-hander, and my sewing teacher never had patience to put herself in a left-hander's shoes or hands. So it was awfully difficult. And when I complained about it at home, my father said, fine, switch to science. And I said, how can I do that? I'm a girl. And he said, so what? Girls are just as good as boys. And this is a landmark of my Zoroastrian community, that they are very open to encouraging women, and all these Zoroastrian wives also are independent, strong-willed, and have a good say in family matters. So anyway, reluctantly for me, my father persuaded the principal to admit me in the science class with all the boys. So coming to MIT with so many boys and me a girl, it didn't seem strange or unfamiliar at all, because I kind of took it for granted from my science class. My cousin also, one class above me, also joined the science stream along with me. And
Yes.
I did physics, chemistry, biology, which I loved. But my father, who was a serial entrepreneur, starting what are called Swadeshi businesses. That means making India self-reliant. He, after World War 1982, when cement was requisitioned and the cement tile business closed, he switched to the manufacturing grinding wheels with the help of two Jewish Czechoslovakian refugees. And that needs ceramic bonds. And my father said one can get, electrical, civil, mechanical engineers, but there are no ceramic engineers. He wanted me to do ceramics. And I wasn't keen to do engineering, really. I wanted to do biology. So he went on his own to the United States Information Service Library down the road, went through what must have been the barons of that time, and came up with Alfred and MIT, and came home one day with an MIT application form and said, sign here, which I did, and sent it off. That's the painless way I got in.
That's incredible. You mentioned your uncle as well. You said that both your father and your uncle were instrumental champions of your career. And it's so interesting that you said your father was a nationalist who believed in Swadeshi. We have found that with so many of the early students at MIT. But tell us what it was like when you arrived to the United States and when you arrived to MIT from South Asia. What was the ratio of male to female students, and what was it like to be an international student at MIT at that time?
Well, the ratio then was 1:60. And the few other girls we had in Bexley Hall, they would joke, God bless the ratio, but none of them really liked it because being in such a minority, they complained that none of the boys would look at them, talk to them, date them, and only date girls from Wellesley nearby. I also was very lucky to have what is called a big sister arrangement. So Martha Goodway, who's an archaeometallurgist at Smithsonian, was assigned to be my big sister. And I could write snail mail letters to her, and she would snail mail me back 2 weeks each way, answering questions about food and clothing and so on. And she said, don't buy any warm stuff in India. It'll all be inappropriate, not warm enough and out of fashion. So come here and I'll take you to Filene's and get you something good. And I decided at the time that with the fashions changing so often and on a shoestring budget, I would just decide to be different and wear a sari a lot of the time, which I almost never do nowadays in my adult life. I don't know why I did it in college. So there was no question of being in or out of fashion if you were different. So I chose that.
And so tell us a little bit more. So you decided to wear saris your entire time at MIT. Was it warm enough for you with the Cambridge weather, and what was it like, to be dressed so differently from everyone else?
Well, I got curious and appreciative looks, and I didn't mind being different. I intended to be different. But what was horrible was that I had done my bachelor's in India in biology, and I didn't have enough credits. So I had to take transfer physics and catch up calculus and extra things like that. And the physics professor decided he wouldn't tolerate excuses from any foreign students, transfer students. So he kept the classes at 7 a.m. Nobody could claim it clashed with any of their 8 a.m. onwards classes. So our dorm was across the Charles River in the Boston side. And I had to walk a mile over the bridge. But the horrible part was that every night the snow plows would clear the road for traffic and put all the snow in high mountain heaps on the footpath. So I would have to cross the bridge clutching this ice cold iron railing and scrambling over the heaps of plowed snow with the wind whistling up my sari.
Oh my
Till I got to
God.
those 7 a.m. classes. It was quite an ordeal, believe me.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. Kim, would you mind putting up the picture that I just emailed you of Almitra in the lab? No, there's another picture actually. I'm sorry, I just emailed it to you. It was part of our publicity for this program. If you can find it. Anyway, we discovered this picture of you in the MIT Museum archives, where you were wearing a sari, and you are working on some experiment in the lab. And I'm wondering if you recall.
Dark basement lab. Yes.
Yeah, tell us what you recall about that, and you know what was happening here.
It was a very dark basement lab. I was firing samples of abrasives with different ceramics and studying the contact angle, wetting angle, and so on. That was my master's project. I'm probably doing something with that. I can't recognize the gentleman next to me. I'm not sure who that is. I don't know if the photo mentions it.
Yes, I think it does. I think the museum archives. Go on.
I had a horrible diurnal cycle when I was at MIT. I spent 2 summers interning with grinding wheel factories, but after my bachelor's, I stayed on 1 summer to finish some credits to get my master's. And there were hardly any students there. The dorm was almost empty, and the labs also almost empty. And I'd sort of work till 3 a.m. and get up at noon, and it was, I'm kind of stuck to that kind of time cycle even today. I sleep at 1 or 2 and get up at 9:30.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think most of the MIT students are in that cycle as well.
Oh my gosh.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Kim, would you put up the next photo, the one that you had showed before of the news article? So Almitra, when we were going through the archives of the tech, we came across this article from 1957 that talked about you being in a newsreel for the US Information Agency that was circulated in India before a film screening of Bhovani Junction. Do you remember how this came about and what this was?
I have no recollection at all, but many years later, I have a recollection of someone telling me how I would walk down the long, long steps of the entrance to Mass Avenue with my pallu trailing horizontally in the wind behind me. I must tell you the funniest thing. When I first entered MIT up those big steps, I walked briskly smack into glass doors, which didn't open fast enough for me. That was my first encounter with automatic doors. There was a lot to learn, believe me, in those days.
Do you remember anything? Thank you, Kim. You can remove that photo. I was just going to say that the U.S. Information Agency, I believe, was out of the State Department of the United States, and it was during the Cold War. This was how they, they wanted to counter the propaganda, I guess, that was coming from Russia about what the United States was like. And so they were trying to depict US culture. So that's so interesting that they knew about you, that they featured you in this. And I looked up the film Bhavani Junction. So this was apparently a Hollywood film that was about Anglo-Indians. And
Yes.
but there were no Indians who starred in it except for extras. It starred Ava Gardner, and so I can just imagine the contrast of seeing you, in your sari walking down the steps, at MIT versus this movie. It sounds really incredible, and I think we need to track down this newsreel if we can.
It would be nice.
Tell us, what do you recall about, your first day, about coming to MIT or those first weeks? You said there was a lot to learn, and it was quite a...
Yes. One thing was that there were huge numbers of people with their legs in plaster, on crutches, in wheelchairs, with walkers. And I kept pityingly looking at them and thinking, oh, war is so terrible. Look what it has done to all these youngsters and so on. It took me a while to realize they were all skiing accidents.
It's so funny. Is there anything else you would like to say or to the students, or that you'd like us to know?
Well, the academic pressure was absolutely killing. And the one haven which I found was in the chapel behind our women's dorm, a circular one with the spire, which the students called beer can with opener. But, but it was the most marvelous, calming sanctuary space inside, with water reflected from the open base onto curving walls and flickering. And there wasn't a cross or anything like that. There was this whole panel of shimmering, glittering little gold rectangles. It was very spellbinding and calming. So I enjoyed sitting there just to de-stress. And I had a wonderful group of friends, mixed American and Indian. So that was a happy time. So all my happy memories are of Boston Common concerts in the open, swans, and Greek food by the harbor, and lovely things. But no really happy memories of the academic part.
I think a lot of students and all of us relate in what you're saying there. Well, Amrita, we could just talk to you for hours. This has been just so fascinating. Thank you for sharing your story and that slice of your experience.
But I have to add that what MIT has really given me in my life, I came back saying I haven't studied this thing or that thing, but it gave a powerful structure for decision making with whatever information was at hand, taking quick decisions, logical thinking, and just going ahead and being decisive. And I think that has stood me in good stead in my life in all the things, the ceramic part as well as my garbage waste management part later on. So I really am grateful for MIT's rug-rowing studies.
Yes,
in
yes,
hindsight.
I agree. It's logical thinking and critical thinking skills that it's really a key part of MIT's, and problem solving. It's really a very key part of the MIT education. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we also thank all of you. You know, we all who have come after you, really thank you for, you know, trailblazing this path and making it a little bit easier for those who've come after you. So thank you very much. It's been an honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
Let me now invite Professor Sana Aiyar, who has spearheaded our history project. We, the alumni, are also deeply indebted to Sana for taking on this project and adding to our knowledge of this incredible history. Professor Aiyar, please tell us a little bit more about South Asia and the Institute, the project, and the current exhibition.
Thank you so much, Ranu. And, thank you, Almitra, for sharing so generously with us multiple times now, your time and memories. It's really always very inspiring to hear from the trailblazers, as Ranu said. But, from my perspective, I came to the United States in 2004 from India for my PhD and stayed, and joined MIT as an assistant professor in 2013. And, when I joined at the history department at MIT, I was, it's a small department of about 15 faculty, and more than half are women. And more than half of the women are women of color who are mostly, have had an international sort of origin outside of the US. And so coming in here, my dean, two of the deans at my school were women. The provost is a woman. The new president is a woman. And to be very honest, my generation takes a lot for granted. And when I came to interview, I was heavily pregnant with my first son and joined MIT, basically being on maternity leave, and, had my second child, none of these, and, getting the leave, getting the things that I needed to be able to thrive professionally and also balance life at home and the care work that a lot of women did. We complain about it, but it, seemed like an entitlement rather than something we had to fight for. When I hear, stories of pioneers like you, Almitra, and when I chat with Ranu, who came, I think 2 decades later, but was only one of 13 graduates, female graduates who were South Asian, it was such a completely different time. And, it's something that I like to remind our students that, these were very hard fought entitlements and rights. And we have to not get complacent about those, but also really acknowledge what came before. And those, the generations before, who fought these sort of battles, and we are, absolutely the beneficiaries of it. But, I wanted to sort of say that while from the faculty perspective, I think that women at MIT have received some amount of visibility more recently. In terms of students, MIT has, since the 1990s, I think quite consciously been changing things with, has been making some structural changes that has brought in many, many more women into the undergraduate class as well as in the graduate classes. And the classes that I teach, they tend to be on colonialism, on South Asia, looking at issues of, resistance and race, immigration, identity. My students are almost, it's not just a majority, but an overwhelming majority of students in my classes have been women. And an overwhelming majority have been women of color. And because I teach a lot of South Asian history, a lot of them have been South Asian Americans predominantly, who really come into the classes, having finished up usually most of, as you said, it's a high pressure environment at MIT, and the students who come in usually finish all their requirements for their majors by the spring of their senior years, when they sit back and say, okay, now I want to think about who I am as I launch into the next world. And I get a lot of graduating seniors, many of whom you'll see over here in a few minutes. And I was very keen when Ranu started talking about this project to bring in these students, because, this really project is about their genealogy much more than it is, about my professional genealogy. This really is about them. And I wanted to inculcate in them some skills about how historians find stories that are otherwise hidden. And women have tended to be hidden in some ways in mainstream narratives, even of MIT, but, of history. And so I told them that, it isn't that the women don't exist, right? They do exist. They are somewhat hidden. And what we need to do is to make them visible. And that not only, I think, tells a very powerful story about, MIT's past, which is a critical history. We celebrate the wins, but we can also sort of turn a critical eye to this. But I think it also empowers our students today. And so I wanted to share with you, with all of you, some of the findings. And we launched this exhibition in October at the Myhogan Gallery, and I wanted to and we have a display on the women of MIT. And Ranu has given a little sense of the statistics and numbers, but I wanted to put some faces, for you. So I have a few slides that I'm going to share, and I just wanted to sort of feature the pioneers, right, but also bring us to where we are today. So I'm just going to pull up for us the display that we put together. We decided to showcase. Are you able to see the screen? It's showing up paused here.
Yes, well. Yeah.
So we decided to showcase the first female undergraduate, graduate student, as well as the first faculty at each of the schools. And as Ranu had sort of mentioned in her opening remarks, apart from the School of Humanities, Arts and Sciences, a school that I belong to, and I'm very proud of this fact, the women came close to 3 to 5 decades after the first male from South Asia entered, whether it was undergraduate, graduate student, or faculty. And to me, that is really, it doesn't need further explanation. The numbers tell that story about how limited access was, and how important it is, I think, to tell this story of, and, showcase the first women who came, and all of them had these, wonderfully successful careers, but these were not easy. It wasn't an easy balance to sort of, to walk here at MIT. And there were also, at least on the faculty side, many lecturers. In fact, before the first tenure positions were opened up, many women came in as lecturers, and till today there are many lecturers at MIT, and they are another part of the kind of hidden sort of hidden story, right? And we're sort of finding ways of showcasing this. So this is just by school, some visuals of the first few, of the first at the School of Engineering, School of Science, SHAS, SANP, as well as Sloan Management. And how we went about doing this research was really to go into the archives at MIT that are called distinctive collections, as well as doing oral histories. And Almitra, I think you were one of the first alumni that we interviewed, actually, and the student who interviewed you has been able to join us, which I think is wonderful. So, here are sort of, images of the freshman, I think it was either the senior portfolio or the freshman portfolio, I forget exactly which are these thick books in the archives at MIT. And on the left side, you see Birendra Gupta, who was the very first South Asian undergraduate.
Sana, I don't think we can see that. It's still on the previous.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Right, I was trying to go full screen, and that might have, okay, let me try this again.
Yes.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thanks for that. So, on the left hand, you see Birendra Gupta, who was the first male undergraduate from India to come to MIT. You see him there in, a sea of white men, and he's there with his turban, which is why we really, found this a very striking image. But we were also then very keen, after interviewing Almitra, to find a photograph of her in her yearbook. And it's a student of ours who'll be speaking in a couple of minutes, Japneet Singh, who was looking through, looking. She kept saying, "Where are the women? Where are the women?" And then there was Almitra, right? You see here, and I think it is a sari, although you don't see the full sari. And as much as, for me, it was a striking image, but when Japneet was being interviewed for this project, she said, she said, I was looking in the archives, and then there she was in a sea of white men. And then Japneet sort of pauses and says, she is the first of me. And, when I heard her say that, I still get goosebumps when I think of that. I think that this is the, what I meant about this being a genealogy of our current students. And it really gives visibility to the women who came before, but it also really empowers our students today. So I wanted to sort of pull those up so that you all got a sense of, the kind of archive that we are working through and the kind of material the students have found. Now, I wanted to share a few other photographs because I think photographs are much more, they say a lot more than the words do. And there is another photograph of Almitra in the lab that she had mentioned, and Almitra in the MIT museum where this photograph is housed. It says you're welding with Hal Foley, and I wondered if Hal Foley was a professor or another fellow graduate student. I'm not sure which, but there is another photograph from there, and
he probably was. He probably was a lab assistant.
I see, quite possibly.
I think
Yeah.
I don't recall him as a fellow student.
I see. So another lab assistant who was there, but in the 1950s and 60s, there were only 2 female graduates, only 2 students who were South Asian who came through. And, I think that it's really important for us to sit back and think of that. It's just 2. It really is tiny. And one would think that the number kind of goes up quite rapidly, but it doesn't. Even by the end of the 1970s, only about a dozen, women from South Asia had come through. And this included women at this point, not just from India, but also Pakistan, and increasingly Bangladesh as well. And they continued to wear the saris that Almitra sort of spoke about. And, on the right-hand side, you see a photograph of Aiyar Judge Oluwalia, who was the second PhD student, second graduate student at the School of Humanities, Arts and Sciences. She did a PhD in economics and went back to India and became a very famous sort of economist over there. And here she is at a party after she attended the defense of her dissertation, also in a sari, surrounded again by a sea of white men. And I think that also speaks to the social life of many of these women, the academic life, the need to strive and, prove yourself at 2 levels, not just capable as a South Asian, but also capable as a woman. And, you sort of combine that, and it is quite a explosive situation. And, when we interviewed actually the first female graduate student who, did her PhD in economics just a year or 2 before Aiyar Judge Oluwalia did, Dr. Swapna Mukhopadhyay, who also went back to India and, continued work as an academic and an economist. She said, I came to MIT and it seemed to be a top place to do economics. But to be honest, there was nothing particularly useful to the situation in India that I was taught in terms of economic methodology. In fact, when I went back to India, I had to unlearn everything that I had learned. So I think that even in terms of the knowledge that is produced, and that is certainly not true for the economics department at MIT today, where development economics and, JPAL, the Poverty Lab, are absolutely at the top of the field of understanding development economics. And that is because the demographics sort of shifted with South Asians coming in and, changing the kinds of questions that are asked even at MIT in terms of, problem solving, Almitra sort of mentioned that. By the through the late 1980s and certainly from the 1990s onwards, enrollments really did go up in terms of South Asian women coming through. On the left hand is another, and you see there are more women in general as well. And Sarbani Bablu Thakur was the first undergraduate student. Well, I think she was the first undergraduate student to do a major in Shaz, but was also a double major in management. So we wanted to have her photograph there. But I wanted to sort of draw attention a little bit to the faculty side. And it was in the 1970s that the first few women began to get recruited to join MIT as a tenure track faculty member. And Prabha Iyengar Sridharan was the first faculty member at the School of Engineering at MIT. She spent 3 years here and, I think quit academia after that, which also speaks to the struggles, right, that are faced by women. Faculty recruitment as well as retention is a very big sort of concern at many universities, including at MIT. She was the first South Asian faculty member, but, I wanted to give a sense of how things changed. So it took till 1997 for the first South Asian woman to become a faculty member at Sloan, 1993 at the School of Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences. The School of Science, it was 2000, that should be School of Science, not School of Engineering, 2002. And of course, today our dean, who's the same person, Professor Malavala, she is sort of the dean. But these are really recent changes. And the School of Planning and Architecture, does not yet have any South Asian female faculty, although I've heard that they are in the process, hopefully, of fixing that. So, the women here, even at the faculty front, I think, they are few and far between. And again, I think this speaks to also for our students, sometimes a lack of role modeling, right, or mentorship and things like that, which I think we should advocate for. And I hope our project makes that visible. But as I said, the 1990s did increase the number of South Asian female graduates and the female presence, South Asian female presence on campus. And we have today, I think, close to 600 students, 400, I forget the number, Ranu, you might remember. It's, I think, 1,500 alumni. And I think sort of in the last decade, the number has gone up to about 450 to 500. Anita Desai was the first professor at Shaz to join us again, a fairly high profile writer. So there have been some high profile ones. But, in order to really capture their stories and their histories and really sort of focus in on what it meant to be a South Asian woman on campus, it was important to move away from just the archive of photographs and yearbooks to actually interview the women. And so in our display are the quotes that we have pulled from the oral histories, all of which were conducted by our students who really asked the question of, what it meant, what were the struggles, right? Was it different to be a woman, a South Asian woman? What is it that made you extraordinary? And as Almitra, I think you said at the beginning of this webinar, there is a sense, in fact, a relief of not knowing that you were the first because of the pressure that came with it. And I think that in our oral histories, it became very clear that there was often a kind of moment of, people looking at these high achieving individuals and are surprised, saying, oh, but you're a woman, you've done so well, right? Or, oh, you're a woman, so maybe we should give you a few extra, weeks to finish your paper. I remember Raji Patel saying that, she wanted to drop a class. The professor said, no, don't drop it. I'll just give you, I think you just need some extra time, right? There's a sort of sense of a patronizing attitude as well that comes. And it is I think it's a balance to when they want to lead from making visible a particularly gendered experience professionally or socially, but also want to be taken seriously as scientists, as economics, as economists, etc. So I think that our oral histories really do bring that to the fore. And I think some of the more, recent, graduates sort of from the 1990s onwards began to point out that, in fact, there is in some ways a unwelcoming atmosphere in some sections of MIT where it is difficult when you are the numbers are low or there's a high dropout rate of women who tend to go into other majors. And I think that this is, again, something that I hope gets folks at MIT to sort of think about as well. And then I just wanted to end with saying that, these are photographs of our students who have worked with us on this project for the last 2 years. We've had, I think, more than 35 students who have, come through in various capacities. And again, they have predominantly, as you've seen, been women, right? They have predominantly been women of color, mostly South Asian, but not all. And I think that that speaks to a certain sort of desire that our current students have to make themselves visible, to empower themselves, but also to make it quite clear that and and this is something that I think a lot about in my teaching, that, I understand them wanting to come into these kinds of projects because it holds great meaning to them. But we shouldn't think of a project like this as being exclusively South Asian or exclusively only for South Asians. But there is a certain kind of siloing, I think, that takes place at MIT, where there is this sense, well, oh, okay, if it is a project on South Asians at the Institute, perhaps only South Asians are interested. But, I will say that ever since we launched this project, I have received a lot of feedback from folks who are not South Asian, who really do see that there is worth in a project like this that helps others also really kind of connect with the kinds of questions that projects like this raise, and really look at the history of MIT as an institution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sana. That's amazing. So I'm now going to bring on the students, but I'd like the participants here to please put their questions in the chat, because we're going to get to those right after we hear from the students. So I'm pleased to introduce 4 of our MIT student interns who've worked on this project. Without their enthusiasm and energy, this would not be the project that it is today. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'd like each of them to tell us a little bit about themselves, what they're studying, their goals and aspirations, and maybe a little bit of their experience of being a South Asian woman at MIT today. What has it been like to learn this history and be part of this project? I'll let you go ahead. Neosha, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Neosha Narayanan. I graduated last year, so class of 2022, from material science and engineering, which is something that I have in common with Almitra Patel. And I had an interesting experience at MIT as a South Asian woman, and it's really interesting to hear the commonalities between the experience now and the experience, 50, 60 years ago, or longer, because for me, it was really my friendships and my community that made MIT memorable. And that was what made it a really positive experience. And experiences like Professor Aiyar's class, where we got to learn about, our history and our heritage, and being part of this research project has been really inspiring and amazing. But I also agree that the pressure of the academics, well, I'm not sure if it was the same level as it was in the 1950s and 60s. It also was my least favorite part about MIT. I know, and I'm grateful that I was able to learn a lot. And I'm certainly extremely grateful for the technical skills and the critical thinking skills that I now have. But definitely the stress and the pressure was something that I'm glad that I have put behind me. But in terms of being a South Asian woman at MIT, I was the president of SAS, the South Asian Association of Students, last year during my senior year at MIT. And it was very interesting in that capacity to see the community. I think the community now is very diverse. The South Asian community is very diverse. There are a lot of students from a variety of South Asian countries, religious backgrounds, economic backgrounds, and so on. So I think that bringing the community together, because it's so large and diverse now, actually can be somewhat of a challenge, because we're bringing together people from a variety of backgrounds, even just within the South Asian community. But at the same time, we are able to do so and bring together people through things that we have in common. And I think being South Asian is always something that people come around. And so that's been like a really lovely experience. And it's really inspiring to hear how the community has grown now, since it was when you guys were, one of very few South Asians at MIT.
Thank you, Neosha. Rajul, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Rajul. I'm also a class of 22, so I graduated last year, and I'm still here doing my master's. So continuing on, I came here from Pune, so I grew up mostly in India. And coming here, I mean, I was very aware that I was going to be not on paper an international student, but kind of it might be a cultural difference. But it was, I think, one of the things that MIT does to you is like there's just so much going on, so much pressure that you don't have time to think about everything. And I think, like Neosha, the groups of people that I found was very important. One of my main one of my main reasons for feeling homesick was not having a place to practice Indian classical dance. And starting a group for that brought me into contact with a lot of really passionate individuals who shared a lot of the appreciation for that dance form, a certain musical form, certain type of storytelling that made me feel very close to home. And as I interviewed Almitra for our project, and during that, I remember hearing like the sari anecdote, for example, and that was 2 years ago maybe. And since then, I've been so much more confident wearing like I had a lot of like Indian clothes like kurtas and stuff brought with me, but I was always very shy about wearing them on campus. And in the last 2 years, I've decided like I guess it's all right. Like if she can do it, so can I. In that case, it's like really a trailblazing moment in that sense. And yeah, I think it's in a lot of ways there are similar experiences. The peace and quiet of the chapel is still absolutely the same, and I think in some ways we are moving forward. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Amelia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, my name is Amelia. I'm class of 2023, so I'm graduating this spring, and I'm majoring in computer science and biology. So I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and so there was very few times in my life I've been kind of the only South Asian in the room, and I think that's something I didn't realize how blessed that was until I kind of had an inkling throughout my life, especially when talking to people from different areas, but I think this project really shined a lot of light on that. And I think especially coming into MIT, kind of echoing really what Rujal and Neosha said, finding communities on campus that were kind of, I think I froze.
No, we can hear you, go ahead.
Okay, then I'm only frozen on my end. But I think finding communities that were very South Asian heavy and focused on South Asian culture, I think was kind of what really helped me transition into college. And I think taking Professor Aiyar's class and really thinking more deeply about what paths different women throughout history have taken for us to be able to get to this point, I think put a lot of my experiences in perspective. Because similar to the others, it's kind of really easy to get lost in like the stress and like the hectic nature of MIT. And we really quickly forget and take for granted everything that we're able to do today. And I think that reflecting on that through this project especially kind of makes you understand that science and engineering, it really can't happen in like a bubble. It really can't happen external to society. And I think appreciating that and appreciating the fact that people like Almitra, people like Professor Aiyar, people like Ranu, like everyone has kind of contributed in making it more possible to have diverse individuals from diverse backgrounds studying these subjects and contributing to society and making them more equitable. I think that was a really important part. And I'm glad that I was able to do that here, because I think it'll help me like later on when I'm kind of pursuing my own career to kind of have that in the back of my head, that science and engineering doesn't really happen in a vacuum, and that it's really important to consider what you're studying and who is studying it. So I think that's something that this project has really helped me understand.
Awesome, thank you. And Japneet?
Hi everyone, I'm Jipneet. I'm a senior, so class of 2023, and I'm majoring in chemistry. And next year I'll be doing the roads at Oxford. And I think my experience at MIT has like really informed my path going forward. And I'm a part of a lot of different communities at MIT. And I think all those different communities have showed me like what it's like to be a South Asian in different atmospheres. So like one of them, I'm an Air Force ROTC, and I think that's one of the communities where I feel sometimes most like a minority, because even at MIT, I'm the only South Asian in that community. But then in different spaces, like my classes, there's a lot more South Asians and diversity in those areas. And I think learning about how my identity informs my education and how all these people have come before me has helped me kind of see where I belong at MIT. And for me, and I grew up in California, so I also was surrounded by a lot of South Asians, usually in Indians, especially in Southern California. So coming to MIT was definitely different in some aspects. But I think also specifically for me, being a Sikh has also always intersected with my Indian identity, and learning about like Sikh history as well, and just like explaining it to different people and becoming more confident in that was a big part of my MIT experience. And this project has been something that I was really thankful to find, because when I came to MIT, I definitely never thought I would learn so much about my history. And of course, we are also focused on, our technical education and like our next career paths. But I think my MIT experience wouldn't have been as valuable, and I wouldn't have had such a good understanding of where I've come from if I didn't take these classes and also didn't have the chance to meet other people who are also interested in that. I think that was a big part of it, that like I'm not the only one who's interested in learning about MIT's history and what's come before us, and meeting other people who also wanted to do that was a big part of why this project is so enjoyable.
Wonderful. And so we are actually at 10 o'clock, but if you all can just stay for a couple of more minutes, I want to get to some of the questions that people have posed in the chat. And most of these questions are for you, Almitra. People want to know, was graduation on Killian Court? Did your family come for commencement? Was the tea around? Could you go into Boston? What was your biggest support system at MIT? Did you always feel like you were a woman and an Indian, or did you ever feel like you were just one of the students? Maybe you can share some of those thoughts.
I don't think at MIT or subsequently in my career as the only woman at the Indian Institute of Foundrymen meetings or anything, I've ever felt female. I've just felt like one among other professionals or engineers or whatever. I never thought in feminist terms. Regarding my parents coming to the graduation, I think it's out of the question. It was way too expensive to come, and not a ceremony worth spending that much for. I remember my first birthday in March when I was there. That means March 57. The long distance operator 6 hours in advance would say, stand by for a call from India. And after 7 months, that was the first phone call that I got from my parents. And they at their end also were told to stand by for 5, 6, 7 hours till they could connect with me. And after that call, when I burst into tears, all the other girls in the dorm said, weren't you happy to be talking to your parents? Why are you crying?
I had the same experience, I have to tell you. I didn't have to wait 6 or 7 hours, but the same thing would happen. I'd burst into tears. Whereas I'd been quite happy the moments before. That's incredible. Yes. And who was your biggest supporter or support system at MIT?
I had 3 wonderful girls. Martha Goodway, my big sister, she was very helpful. but very loving, supporting, and sisterly was Gunn Hovig, a Norwegian girl who I roomed with for the second and third year after dorm. She was a gem of a person, and I think we made life tolerable for each other, away from the stress of studies and everything, because we were both calm, compatible, and supportive. And I had a wonderful, wonderful professor, Theodore Wood Jr. He was an English teacher, and I just loved humanities, and he was a great supporter. He was there for my graduation photos, not my parents.
I think we saw. I think we have those photos as well. Thank you for sharing that. So unfortunately we're just about out of time. I just want to share one more comment from Anisha, who's asking how can South Asian alumni get more involved in supporting students who are starting their journey at MIT. Thank you for your kind words about this project. Please get in touch with us, the MIT South Asian Alumni Association. Please contact us, get involved with our board. We have lots of ways that you can, get reconnected to MIT and volunteer in that capacity. So thank you everyone for this wonderful discussion. This has been so interesting and fascinating. And thank you to Almitra, of course, and to Professor Aiyar and all of our students, as well as Moana and Kim for all of their support of our project. Thank you everyone. Have a great day, and please go see the exhibit if you haven't already. Thank you.